Hi, parents. Kirk Jones, North Coast Church high school pastor, bringing you the weekend recap for November the 11th, 2012. Talked about the parable of the unmerciful servant and a couple of the ideas there. Just probably some of the things that a student wouldn't know, considering they didn't grow up as a Jew in the time of Christ, was that traditionally um, it was Jewish custom to forgive someone three times, kind of like three strikes you're out type of a deal. You would forgive someone three times, and then you're not religiously obligated to forgive them anymore. So the parable starts out with Peter coming up to Jesus and saying, how many times should I forgive my brother? Up to seven? Almost like, look, I'm doubling plus one what the Pharisees are doing. And Jesus says, no, I don't want you to forgive someone seven times, but 77 times, or your version might say 7 times 70, which is 490, I think. And the point of that number is not to say, hey, you keep score and make sure you take good notes, because as soon as they've wronged you 490 times, then the next time, boom, done, relationship over. The point is that there is no limit, that we should always forgive. So then we jump to the parable. And the servant owes like 10,000 talents, which by today's standards, a rough estimate is somewhere between 12 million and $1 billion. So again, the point of this number is not, hey, here's a real number. It's the debt is unpayable. And that was the first thing your students wrote down. The first point was your debt is an unpayable debt. There's no amount of time that you could be allocated to repay that debt. The king then forgave the master. The second point there was that God's forgiveness is undeserved. And then the parable goes on. We see that the servant who received forgiveness went out and demanded that he be repaid a very real amount of money from one of his servants. And when the servant couldn't pay, he had that servant thrown in jail. So this man who receives forgiveness is unable to channel it to give it out to other people. That gets brought to the king's attention, and he reinforces the debt again and throws the man in prison until he can pay it off, which would be probably never. So there's an implication there of eternal punishment. And then, real scary verse, and I'm sorry, we're in Matthew 18 this whole time. I think it started in 21. Real scary verse in 35, Jesus says, "This then is how my Father will treat you if you do not forgive your brother in your heart." So, third thing they wrote down was your job is to forgive others. A couple other things we looked at is we're often blind to many of our sins. And after this man receives forgiveness, he goes out, he threatens, he basically chokes his servant because he's not getting paid. We're not told in the text that his conscience kicks in. We're not told that he's remorseful or regretful about what he does. The only reason this sin comes to light is because the people are around him. So we talked about friendships are good, they're important, but if you want to grow as a Christian, you're going to need to start developing some relationships that are so loving, so trustful, that we can call each other out. And we unpack that a little bit. We talked about how we're only forgiven if we forgive others. And this sounds like a contradiction because, wait a minute, we're saved through our faith alone. Now we also have to forgive people. It's not so much that you're saved and then you learn how to start forgiving. It's more, if we can't forgive others, do we really understand what salvation and forgiveness look like? Just like faith and deeds are so tied together that James says you can't have faith without deeds. If you truly believe, it will affect the way that you live. And so Jesus here is saying, if you truly understand forgiveness, you're going to grasp this. Things are going to start coming into perspective, and you're going to learn how to start forgiving others. The last thing is, and this is pretty heavy, and we're going to talk about it quite a bit in great detail on Wednesday. So there's a reason why I didn't totally unpack this for your students. Forgiving does not mean forgetting. So it's not all about, hey, all right, you've wronged me so many times, but I got to start trusting you again. It can be about rebuilding trust. It's not necessarily even about a person asking for forgiveness. We can forgive someone in our heart, and that's what the verse 35 said. We forgive them in our heart. It's between us and God. It's letting God be God. It's putting it in His hands. It's letting things go, but it's not necessarily forgetting what happened. It's not necessarily rebuilding relationship or rebuilding trust at all. It's much more about not allowing those negative feelings, harboring those feelings, getting in the way of our relationship with God. And it's understanding no matter how terribly wronged we've been, and we talked about, the single mothers who have gone through abuse, and it's like, no way the Bible is not saying, take him back or anything like that. But it's, I just forgot what I was going to say. Oh, it's about understanding that every person is a child of God, that we are pretty jacked up at times too, that we too have an unpayable debt, understanding that these people do deserve a second chance. They are capable of receiving salvation just like we've found it. So again, we're going to unpack that in quite a bit of detail on Wednesday, and I think we're going to be moving into a new series in the next couple weeks, so I'll keep you posted. All right.